Welcome to Dialogue with Prof mandi Rukuni. Hear all the facts as we analyze Africa's issues in order to come up with solutions. In this episode, we will be imagining Africa as one country.
Welcome back to DWP 2022. We are on the fourth episode. Our theme this year, whoever controls Africa runs this world. And in this particular episode, we're going to talk about imagining Africa as one country. We'll do the usual in three segments. I'll give you some facts, then we do some analysis of the facts, and then go into the conclusion and look at some departure points. But throughout all this, we do our usual Sankofa. You know, we apply the Sankofa because we have to contextualize everything around our own identity and historical terms. Why? Because we still suffer from this post-colonial trauma disorder. Our mindset and knowledge systems are trained to look back only as far as when we were colonized. Then when you look forward, it's all distorted. So we have to look way beyond, before colonization, to collect what we have forgotten and to bring all the good stuff as we see furthest forward. So far, we have agreed, I hope, that Africa is the wealthiest continent of all, and it's unfortunate that its people are still poor. We also discussed why industrialized nations would want to stop Africa from being a manufacturing giant, because they would like to actually have access to Africa's massive raw materials, process our own raw materials, and then sell back to us finished goods that they manufacture. Thirdly, we asked the question, who needs who? Who is Africa's real partner? And we argued that Africa has no real partner out there. We are our own real partners. You know, the focus by the rest of the world on Africa is on its resources. They're not focused on Africans. They're not interested in humanity. We just want the resources. And we also agreed, therefore, that because Africans have become this beggar of the world, people begging around, including even heads of states, going to these big meetings to beg for support. We know that no serious player will partner with a beggar. You don't get serious partners that way. So it's important to realize that Africa was the original superpower. That's why we should not beg. It is not this image that has been created that it is the last frontier for development. It was the original frontier for development. So Africa's real poverty, I repeat, is not material. We have all the materials. The poverty is intellectual and spiritual. And when I say spiritual poverty, I don't mean going to church, because that's part of the problem anyway. I mean losing belief in oneself and sitting there hoping to be saved by somebody else, when our own Creator gave us everything we need to develop ourselves. So Africa is better off attaining self-reliance first before you start really hoping to partner with anyone. And Africa can attain self-reliance just like anyone else, because there are countries, not even continents, countries, small little countries like South Korea, you know, I can name Japan, with less than 1% resources of Africa, but they develop their nations and partner from a position of strength. So we always conclude that whoever controls Africa runs this world. After the United States and after China, Africa is the next superpower. Europe, in contemporary history, became a dominant force over the last 300 years, with the United Kingdom colonizing almost half the world. And after that, the United States is the current superpower because they control the Europeans. Now China, because China is succeeding in controlling Africa's resources, is going to be the next superpower, no question about it. We Africans, in rebuilding Africa, we agreed we need to redesign and reconstruct the infrastructure that was left by the colonials, because we're still relying on the same infrastructure, which is more suited, connecting our capital cities, which they built, to our ports, to externalize the resources. The infrastructure has to be redesigned and reconstructed to connect internal population, so that it doesn't matter how remote a part of a country is, it is connected to economic growth. It can be part of one economy that manufactures. And we also touched on the point that we're going to discuss in another session, that industrialization is not building factories. Industrialization for Africa is a mindset shift. It's a transformation of society as a whole, a mindset of massification, reorganizing society so that it is capable of mass production of its raw materials and aggregating it, and then mass processing its own raw materials, and mass consuming our own finished products. That massification agenda is going to be a big topic coming up next. So a weak, divided Africa is the dream of any superpower or any nation that wishes to be a superpower, because as long as Africa is not united, they will control Africa and they will run the world. So today, imagining Africa as one country, what are the facts? Fact number one is that the African elite, like you and me, actually have more difficulty imagining a united Africa than an average typical African who is not westernized in thinking. I say this because the rest of the Africans, maybe the elite could be, say, 10%. 90% of Africans, typical African, actually finds it nonsensical to have to negotiate all these meaningless borders. Most of them don't even know that there's 55 countries. If you ask them how many countries in Africa, they'll probably name the few that they cross borders and visit. It's us elite who have got this problem. But as a typical African loses respect for these meaningless borders, they cross borders anyway. I mean, we only go through the official border posts. But they don't do this to break the law. They are not criminals. They're doing it to achieve the same thing that you and I are trying to achieve. That is, do business, trade, meetings, workshops, visit family members. Their family members are right across a so-called border. I mean, I have relatives in my own country, Zimbabwe. I have relatives in Kalangas out there. There are Kalangas across the border in Botswana. You know, I've got Ndaus in the eastern part of Zimbabwe. There are more of them across the border in Mozambique. We've got Shangans. 4 corners of Zimbabwe are communities who go across borders. So just imagine you're going to attend a wedding or a funeral, and instead of just crossing the border where there's no border post for 4 kilometers, you are there. Now, if you're going to stay within the law, you have to drive 70 kilometers to a border post, cross it, and then drive back another 70 kilometers to attend normal day-to-day business. This is what Africa is faced with. But, we were well trained by colonials. We see a multitude of reasons why Africans cannot unite. We're so different in so many ways. But for a typical African, notwithstanding those differences, a typical African has zero xenophobia. They are quite opposite in the way they naturally see themselves in another African. That affinity for other Africans is so self-evident in the way that Africans live their lives, especially black Africans. When they cross these borders, where there are no border posts, they don't have a passport, they don't speak a foreign language to cross the border, they don't need a COVID test even. So for a typical African, the natural affinity is self-evident. These are people who were integrated before colonization. You can see they were integrated and moved around with no restrictions before this Eurocentric historic past. Fact number 2, the colonial project to suffocate Africa failed. They really wanted, if they could have, exterminated Africa like they did elsewhere and leave a few just working for them. But it failed. Part of this fact in terms of evidence is that in the next few years, by 2025 at the latest, Africans will be the majority ethnic group in the world. Meaning an average person will be more African than any other ethnic group. We also know that between 1960 and 1990, that 30 years of the initial independence of Africa was the most dangerous period for us Africans. We had a combination of young, incompetent governments who did not have the experience to run these nations. Never mind the fact that they did not know they had actually acquired economies which were in themselves either low or middle income trapped. They even with good governance, you can't grow those economies. But most importantly, it was easy through neocolonialism and Cold War to even fuel the incompetence and the infighting amongst Africans. The Cold War made it possible for both the Soviet Union and the United States and some European powers to cherry-pick which African dictator they wanted to support. And the Organization of African Unity could not intervene because in 1963, when the Organization of African Unity was formed, it was on the basis of a European concept of a sovereign nation states. Fact number 3, Europeans hate each other more than Africans hate each other. Let me repeat, Europeans actually hate each other's guts more than Africans hate each other. Why do I say so? Let's look at the big facts of history. We have had 2 world wars. World War I in the 1920s, World War II in the 1940s. Both world wars were basically a conflict between European countries. It was not a conflict in the world. The rest of the world, we were dragged in because we're colonized by these guys. So some had colonies in South America, some had colonies in Africa and Asia. Because Germany was fighting the Brits and its allies, they dragged all of us in, they call it a world war. Twice they took the whole world to war because they hate each other that much. When Africans fight, when we have our wars, it's a local conflict. No one loses sleep thinking there's going to be a world war. It's brothers and sisters disagreeing and punching each other up. It does not escalate to the rest of the world. They think that's stupid. They think when Europeans try and fight, the whole world is at the brink of nuclear war. That's development. I mean, mark my words. If we're not careful, if Africans don't play their key role as the most humanized people in this world, these guys are going to cause the next world war. They will cause another world war, these guys. Don't be told by anybody that Africans are so different. You know, there's so much conflict on the African continent. Conflict has reduced significantly. And when Africans disagree, it's not a world crisis. Africans love each other more than Europeans love each other. The difference, which is really the main point I should be going to, is that although these guys hate each other so much, the moment they see a black person, they unite. So that's the difference. It's not that they love each other. We know they don't. But they will definitely unite to tackle any non-Europeans. any non-white people. That is the point. Whilst we are busy trying to appease them. So when one of the segments coming up, I will be talking about this whole issue of African branding because it is a key thing that we are missing. So the Europeans basically are the ones who evolved this kind of nation, city-state system, which obviously has done great things in history. But today we have to realize that it was a way of officially legalizing disunity amongst brothers and sisters. Fact number 4, Europeans forced on humanity their own culturally specific form of sovereign national state system, which, as I say, has some positive aspects, but the system is too inflexible and forces disunity, especially amongst those who were formerly colonized. So colonization stopped what would have been Africa's own culturally specific way of fighting and integration and creating greater society. So now we have to fight and unite based on a European system, which even today is still not culturally suitable for us. So when I say this, I need to also hasten to add that I'm not an advocate for changing history. I'm not talking like this so that Africans try and change history. No, we were not put on this earth by the Creator to change history. Rather, is to make new history. I'm saying let's do a Sankofa, not to change what happened, but to create a better history. That's all I'm trying to put across. I'm not advocating Sankofa because it's nostalgia. It's simple. The further back you can see what happened, the further forward you can see where you ought to be going. So by Europeans forcing this system in the rest of the world. Now, I'm doing this Sankofa part because most Africans don't know this part of the history. The Europeans, if you go back to the 15th, 16th century, put in their legal framework, in their constitutions and laws, that the only form of political organization that was legal is one that would lead to a monopoly of authority over a specific territory, where the state has the coercive functions over a distinct territory and population. So that's the notion called no land without a sovereign ruler. That doctrine, that legal doctrine, in French, I think it's called nulle terre sans. You can show it up on the screen because I don't even know how to pronounce it. But I want you to know it was a judicial system. It was in their legal traditions and in their laws. No land without a sovereign ruler, which means now the Europeans could go out to the rest of the world and any piece of land where there was no European sense of a sovereign ruler of this specific territory, it was considered open for colonization. That's how they justified colonizing the rest of the world. You know, outside Europe and outside the area, I mean, after, you know, they colonized almost all the world. It was only a few societies that survived this. You know, a few ones who were already kind of organized in kind of early forms of stateness. There's Japan, Thailand, China, a few who kind of survived total colonization because they already had a semblance of this kind of system. Otherwise, the rest of the world was subordinated to one European nation or another as the sovereign nation state. So this left very few places in the world without serious colonization. And a few islands here and there, submerged reefs, a few floating icebergs, if you want. But you know, even today, it's not coincidental that even today, some of the ambiguous territories such as the piece of rock called Gibraltar, they continue to this day to actually generate interstate conflicts because the Europeans still apply this basic doctrine. Fact number 5, unification is not something new to history. In fact, that is the way most countries have come to be today. Every major power came to be through a process of conglomeration of historically unique nations and so on. Take today's undisputed global superpower, the United States. It was only a collection of 13 loosely connected counties, after winning their independence from Britain. Today, they're the world's superpower. Take tomorrow's superpower, China. China has only existed as a unified entity as we know it today for a small fraction of its 6,000-year history. Otherwise, before that, it was just a constant warring of factions and kingdoms and so forth, just like we had in Africa before colonization. So it is possible, therefore, if the United States from nothing could be the world superpower, if China from hundreds of years of infighting and warring today have a unified nation which is going to be the next superpower, it follows, therefore, that Africa, from the ashes of 55 formerly colonized sovereign nation states, will create the next undisputed superpower. And the final fact I want to put on the table, number 6, Africa has definitely made progress towards a unification. Progress both in physical and material terms, but also in mindset terms. In other words, figuring out a uniquely African approach to it as well. So if we go back to the Organization of African Unity, which was created in 1963, that was Mark 1. That was Africa Union Mark 1, maybe top speed 30 miles an hour. By 2002, the Africa Union, as we know it today, was created. That was Africa Union Mark 2. Africa Union Mark 2 is definitely moving at any top speed of 60 miles an hour without any problem. My prediction is by 2030, because it's speeding up. My prediction is by 2030, Africa will have Africa Union Mark 3. Africa Union Mark 3, top speed, 200 miles an hour. It will be the most sophisticated superpower in the world because it will bring humanity with it. It will show the world that you don't have to colonize anyone, you don't have to invade anybody. You just have to slowly unite the whole of humanity again. So those are the facts. I'll be back shortly with the analysis. Thank you.
Stay tuned for the analysis.
So the topic today, imagining Africa as one country. So the analysis, let's go into the analysis, starts with the need to change the narrative. And I'm going to be pointing you to a number of eminent leaders who are changing the narrative. But the most encouraging thing for me as a senior citizen is how our African leaders are now coming around almost 360 degrees over the last 60 years on the unification narrative and strategy. So if we go back to 1956, when the first African country to attain independence, Ghana, got its independence from the British, first impressions are usually right, because the first African president, Kwame Nkrumah, immediately at independence spoke lucidly and clearly of the need to unify Africa right at the point of independence, not waiting to experiment with the colonial state system. He went straight out and said, well, this is the way to go. That was his first impressions. And he publicized his beliefs so well. Most of us know the story, and his material is out there. Really worried at the time that we could easily get used to these small nation states and to the trappings of power, and every president has their own palace and motorcades, and then after a while no one wants to unite with anybody else. But we also know that Kwame Nkrumah and the other heads of state in the early 60s who believed in this idea, the Casablanca group, they lost the argument as more and more African countries became independent in the early 60s. The general consensus, especially pushed by the Monrovia group, was that let's maintain the European-style sovereign nation state. So that group prevailed, but like I said earlier, no problem. That's just history I'm telling you. I'm not trying to say this group was right or wrong. That's what happened. We're not here to change history. We're just here to create new history. So the thing is this, that as soon as the Organization of African Unity was then formed on the basis of sovereign nation states, the rest is history, as they say. It has taken us 60 years to come back slowly to the acceptance that we really have to find African forms of unification. We can't just continue to copy and paste the European model. It's the battle cry for unifying is great. I was saying to my team, I do get inspiration both from some of the young great leaders who are now coming up and really focused on African unity, but I also get a lot of inspiration from our great artists. That's why I was saying to them, if you can't, I don't know about these copyright laws, but I would really want today's youngsters who may not know enough of the musical history to listen to Bob Marley talk about Africa Unite. And then today, his son, Ziggy Marley, sings the same song, So, by the same token, Kwame Nkrumah back in 1956 pushed the idea of unifying Africa immediately. Now today, we have Nana Addo, president of Ghana, coming back with very lucid arguments, very clear-minded pathways towards unifying Africa. So there we are, all the old school guys like myself, let's pass it on to the younger generation, because they will be able to sing that song better than we're singing it. So guys, if we can't give you the video clip because of copyrights, I think we'll give you the link so that you can listen for yourself, the youngsters who don't know these musical giants of the past. So common sense is coming back. That's part of the analysis. Because for too long, we believed in images, not reality on the ground. Now, the elite in Africa is behind the typical African, as I've said. The elite still believe in the narrative of these boundaries with fences and signposts. Now you're in Kenya, now you're in Somalia, now you're in Namibia. You need a passport. The average African just sees that as a bothersome. They are more They are more liberated than us, the elite. They are like water. They will flow through. They cross today. They do what our ancestors used to do before colonization. They will cut across the whole continent without a passport. They don't need to speak any foreign language. And then somebody says to you, you can't unite Africa because we all speak different languages and blah, blah. The Africans who don't speak foreign languages are the ones who are freely crossing these borders, which are meaningless, without any fear. Because, as we've already discussed, the affinity towards each other is not defined by what local language you speak. Africans share an unshakable bond of their approach to the way of life which unifies them. This is not a call for disorder. I'm not trying to preach anarchy. In fact, it's the opposite. I'm just saying what we have today tends to create a bit of anarchy and a little bit of, you create criminals out of normal people who are just trying to have a normal life. Now they can't go and see their relative next door just because it's across some little border that does not exist physically. So that's all I'm saying. It's just a wake-up call to this factory blindness that one becomes used to a broken down system, and you actually start believing it has always been like that. You start thinking, oh, it's meant to remain like that. When in fact, this is just a call for doing something, for being innovative, fixing broken down parts of our society. That's all I'm trying to say. We also come out of the facts realizing that every single state today in this world is a purely arbitrary entity that was formed through the vexes of history. It was not like planned by the creator that this will be the United States and that will be Zambia. No. So for Africa, the same applies. Every state is just a collection of people and resources that were then given a geographical boundary and a coercive force called a government then to manage that. That's all there is. There's nothing we're uniquely creative about a nation state. We can go beyond these things. So in historical terms, the idea of a European style statehood in Africa was something that we eventually believed in after being bombarded by the European colonial masters. We started believing, oh, maybe that's what it is to be a superpower. But for a united Africa to materialize, we can be more innovative, given that the individual statehoodness can be healthier within a united Africa in a decentralized sense. I'll come back to that a bit more in the conclusion. Whatever works best for Africa is what we ought to be looking for. We may also want to agree that the future is not cast in stone. There is no nation state which was created out of a well-planned approach, 50 years on. We have to agree to learn as we go and to change our minds when things are not working. I mean, why have a mind if you can't change it? But the European system of education made us believe that there's only one way of doing anything. And if it doesn't work, it's not because it can't work, it's because you are not doing it correct. That's the fallacy of the European educational system. If you don't realize, if we don't realize as Africans that intellectual poverty is the problem, closed minds, fixed minds is our problem. So it's not about copying and pasting the European model of unification. I've argued today, I hope, that the idea of unification is more convoluted in Africa today because of the elite, not because of the average, ordinary African who actually have less respect for it. But more importantly, I'm arguing today that the majority of Africans are far more open to renewing our national and continental identities, an average African is ready to have a more vibrant society where they mix. They love to mix with people who are different from them. They want Africans naturally, when they visit a place where people eat different food, they speak different language, it's a huge blessing for Africans. And when you are visited by somebody from far away, speaking a different language, bringing different kinds of gifts, that's what defines Africans and their affinity to embrace the differences, because underlying those differences is a common bond of a certain approach to life and certain belief systems. That's why I never lose hope myself. And that's why I always preach to my children, to my colleagues, never to lose hope. Why? Because I'm an African by birth. I'm only a Zimbabwean by colonial law. I mean, I can lose my Zimbabwean citizenship any time because it's a piece of legislation that defines me as a Zimbabwean. But no one can ever strip my birthright as an African. And that's all I need to remind myself and to remind you that if you want to bequeath your children, grandchildren, and future generations after we are gone, bequeath an irrefutable African birthright, rather than these fabricated nationalities which exist only on a piece of paper and can be taken away by another human being. So go back to Nano Addo, this youngish president of Ghana, because he's younger than me, so he's a young man. Listen to him. Listen to him pass on ideas within today's context that the first president of Ghana passed on 60 years ago. I mean, my favorite clip is the one that he's so brilliant about it, and this French president, Macron, is almost going to force to take away his microphone because he doesn't want the cat out of the bag. He still wants colonial France to be in the head of these new young presidents. Fortunately, these young ones are different. I like some of them. They just are taking us to the next level. That would be all I want to say on the analysis. I'll be back shortly with the conclusion. Thank you.
And now it's time for the conclusion.
So how do we conclude this whole issue of imagining Africa as one country? I hope I've argued convincingly that maybe 50 years ago it may have looked like it's not possible. 30 years ago may have started looking like maybe it's possible. 10 years ago, it's now clear it's not just possible. 5 years ago, I'm hearing even presidents who usually are afraid to say bold things because all the donor countries are watching. They are afraid they will be individually marked. Now they are just saying it. So I thought, ain't no stopping us now. There's nothing that's going to stop Africa now. We are on the move, which also reminds me of some of the best music by Africans, African Americans, who, when you realize, ain't no stopping us, we're on the move, then it's time to celebrate. So I hope that my team can get you a few nice clips from McFadden and Whitehead or a later version, Luther Vandross and so on, because once again, the youngsters of today, you will learn a lot about Africa, its past and its present and its future by going into the musical history. Don't just listen to today's hip hop. Listen to the old school music, you will learn a lot. So in concluding, Let's ask the following question. Should Africa be one country? And then assess the reaction. So what I ended up doing is I ended up asking this question 7 times. The first time I asked the question was in the year 1500 of the Common Era. Those of you who are not aware that we have changed the way we look at years, they would say 1500 AD, meaning 1500 years after death. No, that is, we're no longer allowed to use those kind of archaic religious terms where everything is pegged around some religious whatever. So we don't use any of those crazy symbols of death. I mean, after death, crosses. No, it's 1500. Ask the question in 1500 of the Common Era, before colonization. Should Africa be one country? And the answer I got is pretty similar to one that was given by a young man called Julius, who said, oh, what do you mean, should Africa be one country? Is there another country? I'm sleeping in the other bedroom. That's all. You are in the other bedroom. But if you want us to discuss, we can meet in the lounge. If you want to fight, let's meet in the corridor or outside, in the veranda somewhere. So that's the response in the year 1500 of the Common Era. I asked the same question, should Africa be one country? In 1930 of the Common Era. By this time we are beginning to fight this colonial system quite well. And the response I got is, well, please don't ask the question now. Let us get rid of the Mzungu first, let's just, and then we'll talk after that. Because at that time, the mistaken belief, I suppose, was that the Mzungu will disappear. After we fight them and get independent, somehow they're going to disappear. Which reminds me of a story, which is just a story, because I understand in Swahili, the term Mzungu is a Swahili term. And I understand initially the Africans who had never seen white people before, when they saw the first white people come from the shores of the seas, they thought it was a piece of trash washed ashore by the sea. So there's a Mzungu. So they thought they were going to go back. But anyway, that's 1930. So I asked the same question in 1960 of the Common Era. Should Africa be one country? And now, a few African countries are independent. So the answer I got is, why are you talking to me in English? We can only discuss this in French, or at least let's spend the next few years discussing what the official language is, whether it's French, Portuguese, or English, so that we can discuss. We cannot discuss here at the Organization of African Unity in an African language. So we have to fight it out in a foreign language. So don't ask the question yet. That's 1960. Then I asked the same question in 1963. At the time, the Organization of African Unity was finally formed. Should Africa be one country? The answer I got is, well, for now, we are better off remaining as European-style sovereign nation states. We need our independence from each other. We are very different. We have different colonial pasts as well. So that's 1963. I asked the same question in 2002 of the Common Era, and the response I got is, we are now tired of copying and pasting these former colonial masters, and the system is not working. We are still poor and dependent on them, So let's form a proper African unity, union, with a bit more capacity. Maybe we have a Pan-African Parliament. We put it in Midrand in Johannesburg. We have a central bank which will coordinate our central banks. We'll have a standby army so that we can intervene in our own local disputes. rather than allow these foreign superpowers to come and mediate our disputes. So these same foreign powers, are the ones who are causing world wars. They fight amongst themselves and create a nuclear crisis and possibility of the whole world going to war. When we Africans fight, it's a local conflict. It's a brother fighting a brother. It will be over. We never create world wars. But now, let's have our own standby army. We can look after ourselves. So that's the answer in 2002. I asked the same question in 2030 of the common era, and the answer I get is, what do you mean, should we be one country? We are one people, and with whatever we have now, we are determined at least to create a serious one economy, and we are industrializing our own country, Africa, and we are on our way to being the next superpower after China. I asked the final question in 2063, one final time. Should Africa be one country? The answer I get is, you know what? We are now 200 years old after the formation of the Organization of African Unity. We are ready to lead the world as one country. Although we are not violent, and we are not as brutal as the former colonial masters, but the world should know that an injury to any one African is an injury to all Africans. And everybody should remember that. So this answer to the question, today's topic, imagining Africa as one country. You can see over the last 60 years, the answer to that question is increasingly one that realizes no way out but being one unified people. The African mindset is now changing from the old, can we really achieve anything worthwhile by unifying? We need outsiders. We can't achieve anything without the outsiders. So that mindset is now changing we now rediscovering ourselves. Even now knowing how to govern ourselves. Remember the late, great Chinua Achebe, one of Africa's greatest storytellers. One of his last battle cries was how we Africans seem to have forgotten how to govern ourselves. We have lost the ability that we gave to the rest of the world. The rest of the world only learned how to govern itself after we passed it on through Egypt, black peoples of Africa, all the way through Egypt, Athens, eventually Rome. It all started in Africa. Outrun a family, outrun a community, outrun a nation. All started here in Africa. So it's absolutely no question that we as Africans created the basic principles of how people should govern themselves. You just modernize it. It's not like they created brand new systems. But now we can see Africans and African governments exercising more and more proper resource governance. In future sessions, we will then see how these can be even better managed through unification, everything we've talked about. As I said before, Africans are tired of poverty reduction strategies of the United Nations, World Bank. Africans don't need poverty reduction. They want wealth creation. And how we convert our people, our gold, our platinum, our uranium, our cobalt, our oil, all the shebang into an advanced industrial nation. And in terms of unity, it's the vision. We have discussed today, I hope I've convinced you that development is not about boundaries. Unification is not about having fixed boundaries. That's a Eurocentric notion of a sovereign nation state. It's not the fixed fences and signposts which says you're now leaving Zambia, you're in the Congo. So African unification should be revamped at a cultural level, because the majority of Africans still have affinity for each other because of the cultural oneness. It's not the economic. That's the starting point. That's a derivative. And as our cultural bonds are re-established and grow deeper, the ability to transmute political and ideological divisions are materialized automatically. So in conclusion, as I've said before, and as I'm going to say today and tomorrow, whoever controls Africa runs this world. So an Africa that controls Africa and its resources will be the next superpower after the United States of America and after China. So this is an Africa that recreates itself, starting with the elites recreating ourselves, enjoying what average Africans are already enjoying in terms of affinity for each other rather than xenophobia, is the underlying approach to African unity. So that creates this possibility of a healthy form of industrialization. And as I've said before, a healthy form of industrialization makes it possible across the continent to mobilize, to mass mobilize all forms of raw material production so that we can locally, within kilometers, mass manufacture our own commodities and then mass consume our own goods and services. Africans should not be eating food that has traveled 10,000 miles from all parts of the world. How do you eat a chicken which has traveled 5,000 kilometers? We must eat chicken, beef, goat meat that only traveled 20 kilometers, processed locally, grown locally, processed locally. And if we export, it's because we have massified to a level where we are producing, processing, and consuming what we have produced. So that's the kind of approach that we will be discussing in detail in future. An Africa that is conscious to the fact that it does not have real partners out there, but rather we are our own real partners. And until we are self-reliant, and we have to remind ourselves that countries with less than 1% of the resources we have are self-reliant and are bigger global players than Africa. And more importantly, as we go towards our destiny as the future leaders of society, our biggest export will be our humanity, not brutality, because that's what defines us as Africans. Thank you, and see you in the next session.
To stay informed about new episodes, click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell.